So I'm guessing you obviously know all about the likes of Brock Lesnar, Batista, and Bobby Lashley all having a crack at the world of MMA. But not every star to have strapped on the fingerless gloves as well as performed inside of the squared circle have gone on to become household names. In fact, some of these crossover stars have flown under the radar completely. You won't find Jake Hager or CM Punk on this list, but at least some of these wrestlers managed to earn a single solitary victory. Sorry, Phil. I'm Gareth from What Culture Combat and What Culture Wrestling, and here are 8 wrestlers you didn't know competed in MMA. Number 8. Ludvig Borga. Ludvig Borga's impact on pro wrestling in the USA can be best described as minimal at best. As many non-Americans have found in the history of WWE, after being signed in 1993, Borga was instantly typecast as a foreign heel with an anti-American gimmick. How original. The undoubted highlight of his time in WWE came as he was featured in the main event of Survivor Series 1993, teaming with Crush, Jacques Rougeau, and Yokozuna in a losing effort in the traditional elimination match. After leaving the WWE behind in 1994, Borga set his sights on competing in combat sports, making his MMA and professional boxing debuts in 1994 and 1995 respectively. The Finnish heavyweight found a bit of success in the sweet science, finishing his career with a respectable 13-6 record, including winning the Finnish heavyweight title. Not bad at all. Unfortunately, Borga's MMA career wasn't as successful. Yet, he's still the only man on this list to have competed in the UFC, even though he was defeated by MMA legend Randy Couture by submission in under a minute and retired from the sport shortly after. Number 7. Kid Cash. Kid Cash had a storied career in his nearly 30-year term as a pro wrestler. Competing in ECW, WCW, TNA, and WWE, he found success as a cruiserweight who mixed a high-flying style with a variety of technical offense. The pinnacle of his pro wrestling career came during the mid-2000s when he defeated Juventud Guerrera to win the WWE Cruiserweight title, marking his only championship during his tenure with the company. After his release from WWE in 2006, Cash competed on the independent circuit and began training for his MMA debut. In 2008, aged 38, he stepped into the cage for the first time against Brian Brown and lost by unanimous decision. After spending time in TNA from 2010 to 2013, Cash again returned to the independent circuit of wrestling before making a final return to the world of MMA. Now, aged 47, Cash made his long-awaited return to the cage in 2016 and got knocked out by fellow debutant Lindsey Jones, 26 years his junior, and that likely brought an end to his career in the sport. Number 6. Mitch, the Spirit Squad guy. Sometimes you just get unlucky in life. To go from being a promising prospect in the world of professional wrestling to being saddled with a male cheerleading gimmick is a perfect example of this. While the Spirit Squad were regularly at the top of the card during their time in the company, their stint was short-lived, and after being defeated in a feud with DX, the entire stable was relegated back to the OVW developmental territory. Though Dolph Ziggler, and to a lesser extent Kenny Dykstra, would go on to find success in WWE in their own right, Nick Mitchell was released from the company just a few months after being taken off TV. The bad luck just kept on coming for Mitchell when he decided to transfer his athletic prowess into a career in the world of MMA. Most debuting fighters face off with somebody who's got a comparable record with them to make it a fair fight, and while Mitchell's opponent was also a debutant, the skill gap between the two was almost immediately evident. Mitchell will go on to be stopped by strikes and hasn't fought since. Mitchell's opponent that night? Well, it was none other than Derek Lewis himself, who has since gone on to become a legitimate UFC heavyweight contender and is recognized as probably one of the hardest punchers in the sport. So that at least makes his record look a little more respectable. In a way. Number 5. Bam Bigelow. Bam Bigelow's exploits in the business of professional wrestling are legendary. The agile heavyweight headlined WrestleMania 11 against NFL linebacker Lawrence Taylor and had successful stints in WCW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, ECW, and WWE. Displaying a remarkable amount of athleticism for a man his size, Bigelow was one of the premier big man wrestlers of his era, even utilizing a running somersault senton as part of his act when he was a part of New Japan. What is a less known fact about Bigelow is that after leaving WWE in 1995, he competed in one single solitary MMA fight. Taking on UFC pioneer Kimo Leopoldo, Bigelow was seriously outmatched and despite having a size advantage over his opponent, was taken down early and bloodied after some serious ground and pound. Eventually going on to be submitted with a rear naked choke just over 2 minutes into the first round. This losing contest would prove to be the American's one and only foray into MMA. Number 4. Alberto Del Rio. Rio. Out of all the wrestlers on this list, Alberto Del Rio's MMA career is probably both the most well-known and the most successful. Del Rio demonstrated a natural aptitude for Greco-Roman wrestling and medaled at both the World Junior Championships and the Pan American Games in the sport. After missing out on the 2000 Olympics, Del Rio transitioned into a burgeoning career in pro wrestling, while continuing to utilize his amateur wrestling skills by fighting in MMA. Peculiarly for MMA, Del Rio retained the Mexican tradition of donning a mask while competing and fought many of his UFC fights under the hood. In Del Rio's debut, he defeated Pancrase veteran Kengo Watanabe by utilizing his grappling skills to execute a spectacular throw, breaking the Japanese wrestler's arm in the process. After defeating UFC veteran Brad Kohler, Del Rio was signed by Pride and matched with the explosive Croatian striker known as Mirko Krokop. While wearing a mask definitely helped endear Del Rio to the Japanese fans, anything that limits vision when fighting a world-class kickboxer is probably going to prove a bit detrimental. Krokop wasted no time demonstrating the enormous disparity in striking skills between the two, pressuring Del Rio into a corner before nearly decapitating the overmatched Mexican with his patented head kick. Hi-ya! Oh, I made that look a lot easier than what it was. Number 3, Taka Michinoku. Taka Michinoku was one of the first wrestlers to ever demonstrate the Japanese style of technically proficient pro wrestling to Western audiences on a large scale. Add to this his popularizing of the Michinoku driver finishing maneuver, and it is fair to say that the junior heavyweight has left a lasting legacy on the sport. Michinoku's stint in WWE started out successfully as he won the light heavyweight championship tournament in 1997 and went on to hold the belt for 315 days. The length of his reign as champion would fittingly only be surpassed by fellow wrestling legend Dean Malenko and, rather less spectacularly, Gillberg. Yep, there he is. Immediately prior to Michinoku's tenure in WWE, he competed in his one and only MMA fight, taking on Pancrase legend Keiichiro Yamamiya. Despite being dominated in most of the grappling exchanges, Michinoku briefly managed to establish mount position. But because Pancrase rules disallowed striking with a closed fist to the head, his options were severely limited. Yamamiya would eventually secure an Americana from the top position to force a submission from the pro wrestler. Number 2, Jack Gallagher. The only active WWE competitor on this list, gentleman Jack Gallagher has become increasingly popular in the company for his mix of technical proficiency and well-timed comedy spots. Gallagher learned his grappling skills by training at the Snake Pit in Wigan under the tutelage of late catch wrestling legend Billy Robinson. Robinson's style of catch wrestling was utilized by Kazushi Sakuraba throughout his illustrious MMA career, as he submitted 4 members of the revered Gracie family. In his mere 2 MMA fights, Gallagher has definitely demonstrated his aptitude as a submission grappler. In his first fight against Stefan Cowley, Gallagher managed to secure a guillotine choke early in the fight. Despite his opponent attempting to break the hold by slamming him into the mat, Gallagher remained resolute in his attempt and eventually forced Cowley to tap at around 1 minute 55 in the first round. In his second outing in the cage against Cesar Valencia, Gallagher secured an early takedown before using ground and pound to pass his opponent's guard and get into the mount position. While it is highly unlikely that Gallagher will fight again while under contract with WWE, it looks like he could find success in MMA if he decided to fully dedicate himself to the sport. Number 1, Bart Gunn. Bart Gunn had what can be best described as a varied career in pro wrestling. After a distinguished period including multiple World Tag Team Championship reigns with his partner Billy Gunn as part of the Smoking Guns, Bart found himself caught in the mid-card wilderness after their split. His opportunity to shine would come in unlikely circumstances, with success in the infamous Brawl for All. He defeated then tag partner Bob Holly by decision, then followed up by knocking out Steve Williams, the Godfather, and JBL in the final. This all led to that ill-fated WrestleMania boxing match with Butterbean, in which he was knocked out in just about 35 seconds. Years after the tournament, Gunn would revive his legitimate combat skills, defeating UFC veteran Wesley Cabbage Correa via TKO. He would then be signed with Pride FC to face noted giant killer and fellow pro wrestler Ikuhisa Minoa. Minoa took Gunn down right at the start of the fight, and while Gunn was competitive in the grappling exchanges, he narrowly avoided being submitted on several occasions. The second round was contested almost entirely in striking range, and despite owning a significant size advantage over his opponent, Gunn was outstruck completely and lost by unanimous decision. And that is our list. If we miss any out, let me know all about them in the comment section below, and do not forget to like, share and subscribe. I've been Gareth from What Culture Combat and What Culture Wrestling. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm sure I'm going to see you soon. Well.